are going to learn about the concept of interfaces in Java. And here, this thing, as I told you in our previous lecture, is that your abstract classes and interfaces are interlinked with each other, right? So as I told you, like in your labs, you have some problems related to interface. So in today's lecture, we are going to learn or understand this new topic, that is our interface in your Java, right? So let's start with our today's lecture now. So first of all, we will go through the definition of interface, then we will see the what are the applications, and then we will go through the implementation part or the syntax. What is the syntax of interface and so on like that. Okay, so let's start with why do we need your interface. So the interface in Java is a mechanism to achieve abstraction. So if somebody is going to ask you is that how we can achieve abstraction in your Java programming language, so you will say that there are two things via way. First one is your abstract class, and second one is your interface. Okay. So we have already covered abstract class in our previous lecture, and in this lecture we are going to cover with the help of your interface, right? So what do you mean by an interface? So an interface in Java is a blueprint of a class. So as you already know that our class is already a blueprint, okay? But what is an interface? Why do we create interface? Is that because it provides a blueprint to a class, because it specifies what a class must do, but not how. So what does it mean? It means that it is telling us, okay, these are the methods should be there. You have to implement, okay? But it is not telling us that how we are going to implement. So it means that there will be no implementation part in your interface whenever we are working on your interface, right? Like similar to our abstract class. Then I will tell you about what is the difference between abstract and interface. So don't get confused. Like what is the difference between interface and your abstract class like that. Okay, so let's start. So an interface is a reference type in Java. It is similar to your class. It is a collection of your abstract methods. A class implements an interface, thereby inheriting the abstract methods of the interface. So similar to our abstract class, an interface also contains what your abstract methods. It also contains what? A collection of your abstract methods. So in the case of your abstract class, what we have, an abstract class can have two types of methods, either concrete method or your abstract method. But remember that in the case of your interface, whenever you are declaring any method, okay, so by default, that method will become what? It will become your abstract method. Right, so that is why generally we say that okay, an interface will provide us 100% what? Your abstraction. So the reason is that now along with your abstract method, an interface may also contain constant default methods. So nowadays what they have done, they have incorporated new features in your interfaces too. So we are going to cover all these features later on. Okay, so like nowadays, like as you already know that in Java, they keeps on updating the versions. So nowadays, like they have moved to a new version. So whenever they are working on new versions, so what they generally do, they try to incorporate new functionality based on your application requirement. Okay. So later on, earlier, whenever they have introduced this interface concept, so in that concept, we can have or we can go for only abstract method. But after Java version 8, what they have done, they have incorporated all these features. So we are going to discuss about that too. Okay. So why we are using this your interface? Because it is used to achieve abstraction and multiple inheritance in Java. So as I told you earlier that in your Java programming language, if somebody is going to ask you that with the help of class, can we basically use the concept of multiple inheritance in Java? Then you will say no. But with the help of interface, yes, you can perform this multiple inheritance in your Java programming language, right? So a class implements an interface and thereby inheriting your abstract method of the interface. So till now, based on these definition, what you have learned so far is that if we just picked up some keywords is that, okay, we are using interface because we want to achieve abstraction and your multiple inheritance, and it is somehow related to our abstract methods. Means in interface, we have abstract method. But till now, you are not able to, I can understand you that you are not able to identify the difference between your abstract class and interface. Okay, so we are going to cover that part in our upcoming slides. So first of all, we are just focusing upon your interface part of it, right? Now, so what is the definition of your interface? So see, you will find different variety of definitions. Okay, so I'm just telling you about what is your interface. So an interface is any service requirement specification, any contract between your client and service provider, and or you can say that 100% pure abstract class is nothing but your interface. So what do you mean by service requirement application? For that, I am going to give you one example. That is my first case. For what do you mean by any contract between client and service provider? For that, I am going to give you an example of Bennett University Automation System. And for your 100% pure abstract class, I'm going to give you an example of your, if we are going to create an interface for your corona disease like that. Okay, so let's go for our first definition is your service requirement specification. So I think you already have heard that this term is known as your web server. So in web server, what we generally do, we run our applications. So whatever the applications we have, okay. So generally, let's assume that Sun Microsystems. So earlier you already know that Java programming language was developed under your Sun Microsystem. Now it's under your Oracle incorporation, right? So suppose they have created your servlet API. So servlet and all these things you are, so right now we are learning J2SE. Okay. So whenever you are going to learn your J2E, okay, at that time you, or you can say that whenever you are going to learn about advanced Java, so in advanced Java there are topics like your servlet. Okay, so in that thing you are going to learn, okay, how to perform server side programming and all those things. So Java is very helpful. Okay, so that is why Java becomes so popular, because of whenever you are performing and whenever you are creating servlet and all those things. So in that scenario, Java is far better than your in comparison to your other programming languages. So now suppose you want to create a servlet API, and what is our problem? Our problem is that now we want to run our application. Suppose we have some application and we want to run our application in our Apache server, our Oracle server, that is our WebLogic server, as well as your IBM server, that is your WebSphere server. We want to run all these our application in all these servers. So you can see over there that most of the application will run on all these servers. So how we are able to basically perform these things, because the way basically they have implemented all these servers are different, but still how we are able to implement these things. So with the help of your servlet API provided by our Sun Microsystem. So basically what I mean to say is that Sun Microsystem has basically provided an interface, okay? An interface which will tell us, okay, that these are the things, these are the protocols, or these are the methods should be there if you want to create or develop your own server, right? So they have to follow these your service requirement specification. So these are the service requirement specification are provided by our Sun Microsystem for our servlet API, and they have to follow our Apache, our Oracle, as well as our IBM or whatever other servers we have. So somehow they are basically performing the whatever the requirements are there for our server. So for example, for servlet, we require some network protocol. So if we have created a method for our for example, I'm just giving you an example for network protocol, then it becomes compulsory for all these your servers to basically implement that network protocol method like that. Okay, so here I just want to give you an example so that you will have an overview that why interface is required, because interface will provide you a kind of a requirement specification, right? So like for if you want to design your web server, so these are the methods you have to implement. If you are not implementing all these methods, then we can say that you are not satisfying the you can say that protocols of being a servlet like that. Okay, like that. Now based on our second definition, so in suppose if we want to create our Bennett University automation system, so let's assume our client is our university people. Okay, so suppose they want that, okay, for our Bennett University automation system, we want these such kind of method like get attendance, get marks, update marks, and so on like that. And suppose we have given this basically this to some TCS or Infosys, any company like that, and they are our service provider. So what we are basically doing, we are performing some sort of contract, because we want that you should apply these methods. So somehow what will happen, our client will meet with let's assume it will meet with some management guy of our TCS or Infosys, and he or she will ask that, okay, we want all these methods. So based on this thing, what they can do, what our TCS guy can do, there are other ways too. I'm not saying that there are not other ways, but if we are using interfaces, then how we can basically sort out this problem is that what we will do, we will create interface, and in that interface we will tell them, okay, we are going to create what all these methods, and we will perform the operation. Here our client is not going to ask you about, okay, you have to implement these methods like that, because he don't know about the implementation part, but he wants that, okay, I want the attendance of a student, I want the marks, I want to update the marks, and so on like that. But how we are going to implement all these things are going to be done by our service provider. So it is a kind of a contract also. Okay, so we can use interfaces whenever there is a client and service provider and we want to perform some sort of contract. But in our labs, or but whenever we are going to discuss it with the help of our programming, or whenever we want to code interfaces in your Java programming language, so this is the syntax we are going to follow. Okay, like in your labs, if you have solved some of the problems, so this is how basically you have created an interface. Okay, so whenever you are creating an interface, so again you have to create what? You have to use a keyword known as your interface. So similar to your class, what we generally do, we generally create a class ABC, and then we just write whatever the thing we want to write. Similarly here also, in the case of your interface, we are just writing interface over there, and then whatever the name of that interface, and then what we are doing, we are writing all these methods. So one thing which you can see in these methods, what thing you can see pointed out in these methods is that this semicolon. So in our previous lecture, what we have learned, whenever we are creating method as your abstract method, then you have to put semicolon after those methods. So there should be no implementation part, okay, in those methods. So in our interface, whenever you are declaring these methods, okay, so by default, these methods are what your abstract methods. You don't need, if you want to write it down abstract, you are not going to get any error. I'm not saying that you will get any error, right? So if you want to basically if you are creating any interface, and if you want to write some your what we call it as your some methods over there, so what will happen, it will automatically all these methods will become what your abstract method. So suppose, as I told you that, like if we are assuming, okay, so suppose there will be some corona disease, okay, and suppose we don't know that what there should be some symptoms. We already know there should be some vaccine, there should be some precaution, but we have no idea about them. So what we will do, we will just create an interface. So the class, so who will implement? Now again the question that comes into your mind is, who will implement? So again, your child class, who is going to basically inherit this your interface, right? So the class is going to implement all these methods similar to our abstract class, right? But in abstract class, as you already know, that we have to mention whether that class will be your abstract class or your concrete class. But here in the case of your interface, you don't need to provide. By default, our compiler will assume, okay, these methods are what your abstract methods. Okay, if I'm going to write like this, then I will get an error, because in your abstract, in your interface, we cannot have concrete methods. What we cannot have? We cannot have concrete methods. Now, so as you already know that if we have created a interface, right? Now I want to create a class COVID-19 and I want to implement these methods. So earlier in our case, whenever we want to perform inheritance in our classes, what we generally do, we always use this keyword that is known as your extends keyword. But whenever we want to perform inheritance, okay, whenever we want to perform inheritance among your class and your what we call it as your interface, then we always use a keyword that is known as your implements keyword. Always remember, here if I'm going to use extends, then I will get an error, because a class can extend your superclass, but a class cannot extend your interface. So what our class can do, a class can implement. See, that is why they have used this keyword, so that the programmers will have a more familiarity about, okay, here you are performing the implementation of that particular interface, and we will came to know about later on, okay, this corona disease will be what an interface like that, right? So here in this case, if I am going to write COVID-19 implements corona disease, this is what my interface is. And if I'm going to implement void symptoms, see this method I am basically what implementing right now. But if I'm going to execute this code, so you already know that why we are getting compile time error. Like as I told you in the case of your abstract classes, that whenever you are inheriting, whenever your child class is inheriting your interface or your abstract class, so whatever the methods that are abstract methods that are there in your parent class or your interface, it is mandatory for you to implement those methods. If you don't want to, if you want to make that class as non-abstract class. So right now, what kind of class is mine? That is your non-abstract class, because I am not using abstract keyword over here. And you can see over there, I am not implementing these two methods over here. So that is the reason I am getting compile time error. So how I can basically solve this issue? How can I resolve this compile time error? So there are two ways. First way is I can use and I can make this class as what my abstract class. Now this class will become what? Abstract class. So if I'm going to compile this code, I'm not saying that I'm going to execute this code. If I'm going to compile this code, then I'm not going to get any error. Why I'm not going to get any error? Because even though I'm not implementing these two methods, right? But still I have made this class as what your abstract class. So in abstract class, yes, you can have abstract methods. All right. Now, Now inside interface, this is very important, right? Inside interface, method is public and abstract. What it means, like as I told you, that automatically whenever you are going to compile this code, then this void symptoms, our compiler will add, means you can say that this our compiler is providing these keywords. Okay, so this void symptoms will convert it into your public, abstract, void symptoms, like that. Got the point? So you don't need to, if you want to write, that is okay. You are not going to get, you will not get any compilation error. But if our compiler is providing you this functionality, then why to write these two keywords? Okay, so that is why whenever you are creating interfaces in your Java programming language, and whenever you are basically declaring some methods, okay, so no need to write public and abstract. So by default, your methods are your public and your abstract. So you already know that why it is public, because why we are creating interfaces, because we want that every class should follow that particular interface, so anyone can basically use the functionality of these, not the entire functionality, they can access that particular interface methods. Similarly, why we are making it as abstract? Because we don't want to implement here. We just want to provide a blueprint, okay? Or we just want to provide a requirement specification, service requirement specification. We don't want to implement all these things. So that is the reason why we required interface in your Java programming language, right? So this is how basically you can create interface, like you have to use this keyword, and whenever any class is implementing that, for basically what, that particular interface, then you have to use this keyword, right, like that. Now similarly, the other way is, if I don't want that compilation error, is what I can do, I can write class 19 COVID-19 implement COVID corona diseases, and here what I am doing, I am implementing all these methods. So if I'm performing all these methods, and now if I'm going to compile this code, then I am not going to get any error. Remember, I will not get any error. Why? Because here I am implementing all the classes. So here inside this class, I don't have any abstract class. I have only concrete class. So if we have concrete class, so we can make that class as what your non-abstract class. Got it? Now, so inside interface, method is so this is what I have already told. So till now, is there anyone who is having any doubt? They can ask. Yes, anyone? Okay. So let's continue. Yes, anyone?
No, sir, no, sir, no doubt.
Okay. Yeah. So let's take one more example. So suppose if you want to create printable interface that has only one method, so how you are going to create? So I'm just giving you an example over there. Okay. So what you do, you just create an interface named as your printable. So see, this method I have created, I'm not writing public and your abstract, because automatically this method will be what, my public abstract method. Now I want to implement this your method. So what I will do, I will create a class and I will use this keyword. Always remember, please don't write extends over there. You will get an error. Okay, I will tell you about the differences among your extend and key, your what implement. But basically, in both the ways, you are performing inheritance. Okay, means whatever the methods that are there in our parent, in your interface, we are going to acquire it in your this class, right? So here we are implementing it. So if we are going to create an object, so if we are going to execute this code, so we will get an output. Now using this diagram, why I have added this diagram in our in my presentation, so that you will have an idea about when to use extends keyword and when to use implements keyword, right? So whenever you are using this, your class and class, so if your subclass is basically inheriting your superclass, then you use extends keyword. When to use interface keyword? Whenever your class is implementing, or you can say that whenever your class is inheriting your interface, then only in that scenario, in that case, you are going to use implements keyword. And again, always remember, sometimes students generally get confused and they will write extend implement over there, because see, we cannot, an interface cannot implement other interface, it can only inherit. Okay, so that is why over there also you can use extends keyword. You cannot use in your implements keyword, because an interface cannot implement, because implementation part we cannot perform inside your interface, right? So that is why what they have done, so they have made these keywords so that you will have a better understanding that okay, when to use implements and when to use extend keyword. So for this homogeneity, you can say that homogeneous mean nature means when both of them are class or interface. These are what your homogeneity. So you directly use extend keyword. When you are using heterogeneity, means class is inheriting your interface, always use what your implement. And always remember that an interface cannot inherit or extend your class. So vice versa. So it is a unidirectional. Okay, it is not like that a interface can inherit or extend a class. So it is not possible in your Java programming language. Got it? So you already know the reason, because it is of no use, because our interface is providing a blueprint to a class, not our class is providing a blueprint. Okay, so that is why we can an interface cannot inherit your class, right? So a class extend another class, and an interface extend another interface, but a class implements an interface. So this is very important. So I hope that whenever you are going to write your code and whenever you are going to solve any your problem, your lab problems, so if you are facing these such kind of scenarios, so when to use extend, when to use implement, now you have all of you are having an idea about that. Okay. So but always remember that all these are what your inheritance. Okay, so using extends keyword as well as implements keyword, we are performing inheritance. Means you whatever the thing that are there in our parent thing, whether it is an interface or our parent class, we are acquiring all those things in our child class, or as well as whatever the thing we have. Got the point? Now, so this is very important, that extends versus implements. So a class can extend only one class at a time. You already know a class can implement any number of interfaces. See, these points are very important. A class can extend only one class at a time. So you already know that it cannot inherit multiple classes, because our Java doesn't support multiple inheritance. So that is why only one class at a time. But this is very important, that a class can implement any number of interface. So suppose if you have 5 interfaces, right? So a class can implement all your 5 interfaces simultaneously. So you are not going to get any error. So I will give you some examples. So using those examples, you will understand how we are achieving and what are the problems that might occur. So I have basically incorporated all those things in these slides. Okay. So an interface can extend any number of interfaces simultaneously. Similarly, if somebody is going to ask you about can an interface extend any number of interface, so yes, it is possible in Java. A class can implement any number of interfaces simultaneously. Again, this I have repeated the same statement. And a class can extend. This is very important. A class can extend and implement any number of interfaces simultaneously. It means that in a single line, like for example, class base can extends parent and implements your interface. I'm just writing in int1, int2 like that. So it is possible in Java that in a single line, our class can perform inheritance as well as your implementation of that particular interface in a single line. It is possible, but yes, you cannot perform multiple inheritance again, okay, with directly with the help of class, but with the help of your interface you can do perform this thing. So using example you will understand each and everything. So let's take some examples. So whatever the statement I have shown you earlier, so we are basically going to see with the help of example, and we will try to figure it out that how we are going to sort out these issues.
Study children.
Yes.
For example, if we have a child of age 3.5 years, we will instead consider a point on the line with coordinate 3.5. And if we have another child of age 6, we will instead consider a point with coordinate 6 on
Is
the
there
line.
anyone who is having any?
Now, what the groups of children correspond to? If we have a group of children, it consists of several children and several points on the line.
Okay. So let's take this example, okay? So in this example, what you can see over there that we have an interface COVID-19 and we have an interface your what we call it as your SARS. Let's assume. So you already know that these are what, suppose I just want to give you an example like that. So these are the hypothetical examples. So interface COVID-19 and interface SARS we have created. So what does it mean? So let's assume there are some methods, abstract methods that are there inside these two your interface. So how if our class wants to implement, so a class can implement many means more than one number of interfaces, okay? So you can see over there, if I'm going to execute this code, so I will not get any error, okay? Because see, here in this scenario, using this what we are doing, a class is inheriting multiple in your interfaces. So here in this scenario, you are not going to get any error. Similarly, in the second case, you can see over there interface. We have these two interfaces, and now here my interface. What I told you that an interface can inherit what your multiple interfaces. So yes, it is possible in Java, but whenever you are using or whenever you are inheriting interface in your child interface, you have to use extends keyword, right? So that is the reason what will happen. You are going to basically use these two keywords. So if I'm going to execute these two codes, so you are going to get the output that is your hello world. So it means what these two examples are suggesting us is that a class can inherit multiple in your interface, or your interface can inherit multiple your interfaces. So you are not going to get any error at that time. Okay, so multiple inheritance, that is why I said earlier that whenever you are using the concept of your interface, so using interface, we can perform multiple inheritance in your Java programming language. Now, so extends versus your implements. Now, your third case is that let's assume we have your interface COVID-19 SARS. So right now I am not basically adding any methods over there, because later on I am going to add these methods so that you will understand each and everything. So can anyone tell me, if I'm going to execute this code, so what output I will get? If I'm going to execute this code, what output I will get? Yes, anyone? You can use your chat box, or you can still, if you want, you can unmute your mic. So I got one answer. That is an error. Okay, so that is correct. So we will, so Harshvardhan is sir, if a class implements.
Sir, could you show me the code again?
And both interfaces have the same method, then yeah. So Harshvardhan, I am going to give you these instances, okay? All these cases I am going to tell you about what will happen if we have conflict. So this is a very good question which you have asked, okay? So I am going to rectify your doubt in our upcoming slides. Right? So here in this scenario, see what will happen. In this scenario, we will get an error, because as you already know that our class is inheriting multiple classes. So multiple inheritance with respect to your classes are not supported in our Java programming language. So that is why you are going to get an error right now. But in the case like as I can show you over here is that in our last case that a class can extend your parent class and can implement your multiple inheritance. So always remember it is possible in your Java programming language that in a single line we can inherit your superclass and we can implement your multiple inheritance, your what we call it as your interfaces in your Java programming language. So yes, here in this case, if you are going to execute this code, so what will happen? You will get an output that is your hello world. So a class can extend another class and can implement any number of interfaces simultaneously. So always remember this thing. Okay. So if in your exam, if we will give you this question, so don't get confused that we will get an error. So you are not going to get any error. Okay. So it is supported in your Java programming language. So all the cases I have already provided you. Now you have to just go through one by one. So this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, this is 5. So all these are what my 5 cases. Now you have to tell me about which case is valid or which case is invalid in your Java. So first one is valid or invalid. So what you can do in the chat box, just write it down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just write down your answer like this. If the answer is I, V, V, I, V, so write down I, V, V, I, V like that. Okay. So because we have 5. So just go through these, what we call it as statements, and now tell me about whether these statements are valid or invalid. Okay. Just go through it. I'm giving you 2 minutes of time. So why I'm giving you these such kind of statements, so that you will find out that so you will have a better understanding about, okay, whatever the thing we have covered so far, are you able to understand or not? And it is a kind of a, you can say, exercise kind of thing for you too. So if you have understood something wrong, then we can rectify it out by using this example. Okay, so let's check it out. I can see the answer. I got I means 3 invalid, then valid, then invalid. Okay, so 3 invalid, valid, invalid. 4th is valid, only 4th valid. Okay, so 4th is valid. So majority of you are saying that 4th is valid. So let's go through one by one. Okay, so a class can extend any number of classes at a time. So you already know that this is invalid. Okay, so a class cannot inherit multiple classes at a time. So multiple inheritance with respect to class is not supported in our Java programming language. Second point is a class can implement only one interface. No, it can implement any number of interface. So again, it is what you are invalid. Now, third point is an interface can extend only one interface at a time. Again, it is invalid because an interface can inherit. So as I shown you earlier, like here. So here, what our interface is doing? Interface is inheriting multiple So here you can see we are not getting any error. So again, it is invalid. So an interface can implement any number of interfaces simultaneously. So what it is telling us, that always remember, go through this definition, because some of you have has posted the answer that this one is valid. Again, this one is invalid. Why it is invalid? Go through this term. Can an interface implement any number of interfaces? No, it can only extend. That is why this is very important. Okay, so an interface cannot implement any number of interfaces. It can extend only. That is why, again, what it is invalid. And the last one is a class can extend and can implement another interface, but not simultaneously. But here in this question, you can say that we can perform simultaneously. So again, this statement is what your invalid. So all 5 statements are what your invalid. So I hope that you understood this concept. Yes, is there anyone who is having any doubt in this in these 5 statements? He or she can directly ask me if they have any question. Okay then. All these are what your invalid. Got the point? Yeah. So whenever you are basically solving any problems, don't just basically start solving the problem by just seeing the only the keywords. Just go through all these things, what this statement is telling us, like that. Okay. Now interface methods, as I told you that interface methods are your public and your abstract. What I told you, that our interface methods are always public and abstract. So why they are making it as public and abstract? So why public? To make this method available to every implementation class. And why abstract? Because implementation class is responsible to provide implementation. So that is why in Java, whenever you are declaring any method inside your interface, so that method will become what your public and abstract method, right? So now what does it means? It means that if you are writing void m1, okay, and if you are writing public void m1, or if you are writing abstract void m1, or if you are writing abstract public, all are equal. So you are not going to get any error. So all these statements are equal. So if in exam, if I'm going to give you like which one is valid statement on all these statements are equal, then you will say yes, all these statements are equal, because our compiler is providing public and abstract. So even though if you are not writing, our compiler is providing, and if you are writing by your own, then no issue. Our compiler will consider that too. Okay, like that. Now this is just an MCQ, so you have to tell me like which of the following declaration are valid or not inside interface. So if I'm going to write public void m1, whether it is valid or invalid, so you already know that it is invalid. Why? Because here you can see that we are performing implementation detail. So all first 3 are what your invalid. Got the point? Now next one is what your this one. This one is what your only valid. Your static void is what? Again, it is invalid. This one is your valid. Okay, but we have a static method, so don't get confused. So right now, if you are directly making an abstract method is over there, so again, you will get what your invalid. Okay, so it should be abstract public void m1, or it should be only void m1, or it should be either public like this, or either it should be like this. So it's up to you what kind of representation you want. So it's better, I will advise you to go for only this, because you already know that our compiler will incorporate these 2 keywords, abstract and your public. Got the point? Now, so interface variable. Now, till now what we have discussed so far is that our interface contains method. But our interface not is also can also contain what variables. So you already know that whenever we are writing int I something like that, then I is what variable. So in our interface can have variables too, but there are some what we can say that rules. Okay, so what these rules are? So an interface can contain variable. Okay, the main purpose of interface variable is to define requirement level constants. So why we are basically using interface variable? Just to provide requirement level constant. So I will give you one example, and using that example you will understand the concept of requirement level constant. Okay, so for example, we want to create a interface of your college automation system, and we want that whenever name is allowed, go for Bennett, and whenever location is allowed, go for Greater Noida. I want like this. So in order to make that, what we generally do, we basically use a variable inside our interface, and that variable will do what? That variable will hold these values. So always remember that in an interface, like as I told you, that whatever the methods we are defining in our interface are what your public abstract. What are these methods? Public abstract. Similarly, whenever you are declaring a variable inside your interface, then automatically that your variable will become what? Your final static, public final static variable. Okay, you can call it as what? Your public final static variable. So what do you mean by final? I'm just revising your concept to make it constant. What do you mean by static? Without creating an object, we can basically access that variable. And why we are making it public? So that every implementation class can access that thing. So see how they have designed this interface part. So how Java developers, their team, have basically created and incorporated this concept interfaces, so that they want that, okay, if they want to incorporate this variable, but that particular variable should be what? Final static and your public. Got the point? So let's take one example. So what I mean to say is that whenever you are writing int x is equals to 10 inside interface, then it means that if you are going to write public int x is equals to 10 static, all these are what you are saying. Okay, all these are what you are saying. So let's take one example, and using this example you will understand what I am saying. So whenever you are creating an interface printable, and if you are writing int min is equals to 5 and void min, so what our compiler is doing, automatically our compiler is incorporating and making that variable and adding public static final over there. And for our method, it is adding public abstract, these two, right? So what does it mean? It means that now we have made, because you know the functionality of final keyword. What is the functionality of final keyword? It makes that variable value constant. It means that now you cannot update the value of that variable, right? So that is the reason in interface we basically add, just in order to make requirement label constant. So if somebody is going to ask you what is the need of variable inside your interface, so you will say that the reason is because of requirement label constant, if you want to create like that, right? Now you have to predict the output. Can anyone tell me, if I am going to execute this code, what output I will get? Yes, anyone?
The error.
Yeah, so I got one answer, that is error. What about others? Is there anyone who is getting some different answer? Yeah, just go through it.
No, sir, it should not give an error.
So one answer, we will not get any error, no error. Okay. What about others? Anyone? So one Harsh Gupta has posted 2.4. Okay, so let's go for it. So what I told you about this thing, in interface, whenever you have this your variable, then your variable will become what? Public static final.
Yes, sir.
Public static final means whenever you are making a variable as final, then that variable will become what? Constant. Constant means you cannot update the value of this variable. But here what we are doing, this class is implementing this variable, and here we are updating the value of mortality rate from 2.4 to 5.6. So it means that we are updating the value of this variable. So that is the reason we will get an error. So what error we will get? Let's see. Cannot assign a value to final variable mortality rate is equals to 5.6. So here you are getting an error. So see here, I haven't defined this thing as final. So automatically my compiler is making this line as what? Public static final. Got the point? So that is the reason whenever you are going to execute this code, so you are going to get a compile time error. So through this example, I hope that you understood the concept of your final keyword, that okay, using final keyword, you won't be able to make any changes. So whenever in your program, in your project, you want to make something constant, some variable constant, like your gravity. Suppose if you want to create a project on physics and you want to make this variable as your 9.8, okay, like your gravity value. So in that scenario, what you do, you just make it as final. Okay, so that what will happen? Nobody can change this value in future like that. Okay, so that is the advantage of making your variables constant. So this thing, so what we have learned so far. So who has posted me that question? So let me check. I think, yeah, Harshvardhan has posted a very good, valid question. Okay, so in the next class, we are going to discuss about that thing, because what if we are having method naming conflict and all those things, because we have, so I have incorporated all those things. So that is really a very valid question. So because as you already know that whenever we are working in our classes, so in classes, why our Java doesn't support multiple inheritance? Because over there we are getting due to conflict. What if we are having method naming conflict over there? But why in interface we are able to basically perform multiple inheritance? Because here also we can have a conflict. So we are going to discuss in our next lecture that how we are going to deal these such kind of issue. But I'm just going to end this class before having, so that you will have not have any confusion between your interface and your classes. So I'm just going to give you the what are the similarities and what are the differences among your classes and your interface. So an interface can contain any number of your methods. So similarly, like your class, our interface can also have any number of your method. An interface is written on a file similarly like a.java. It's not like that you are going to use some different extension. Okay, so the extension will remain same for your class as well as for your interface. So the bytecode will remain same, everything is same. An interface appears in package and their corresponding bytecode file must be in a directory. So if you want to, like what we generally do, if we generally write import package name dot class name, right? So similarly here also, if you just want to import some package, so if you want to import some interface, so you can write interface also. And whenever you are writing import java.util, whenever we are writing import java.util, suppose, so here you are not only importing the your classes, you are importing packages also, sorry, interfaces also. So whatever the interfaces that are there in our java.util, in your inside our util, okay, so all these things, or in our util package, we are able to basically import all these things. Got the point? Now what is the difference between interfaces and your class? Similar to our abstract class, we cannot create an object of your interface. An interface does not contain constructor. In our abstract class, we can have a constructor, as I told you in our last lecture. Okay, but in interface, always remember it does not contain a constructor. All of the method in an interface are abstract. For earlier version of Java, I will tell you about what happened in the later version of Java. An interface cannot contain instance field. The only field that can appear in an interface must be declared static final. Always remember, okay? So we cannot create instance fields in our interfaces. An interface is not extended by a class, it is implemented by a class, and a class can extend multiple interfaces. So these are the things we have covered. So in our today's lecture, we have gone through the syntax, what is the need of interfaces, what is the difference between interface and your abstract class, what is the difference between your interface and class, what are the things, what are the cases, several cases, syntax we have covered so far. So in our next class, we are going to discuss about that why Java interface supports multiple inheritance, why there will be no confliction among the same name, same naming convention and all those things. So in our next lecture, we are going to discuss about multiple inheritance in Java with the help of your interface. Okay. So I hope that yeah, if anyone is having any doubt, he or she can directly ask me. Yes, anyone? Yes.